There we are, Mr. Radio Free Mormon.
Could you even hear me the first time?
I know, and I had you muted, so I unmuted you. That's my fault, everybody, not RFM's problem.
Thank you for saying that. It saves me the trouble of saying it for you.
I feel like, just folks, FYI, there feels like there's some sound issues on my end tonight. I really apologize for that. But RFM, how are you doing?
I'm great. It's a good thing you're not in charge of the show or anything.
Yeah, I'm in charge of the show, so hopefully you guys can maybe do a lot more talking, and we'll have you guys read the quotes and stuff. But let's bring Dan Vogel back on.
Oh, I wanted to say something.
Oh, please, by all means. Should we put him back down below?
Yes, back to the green room with Mr. Vogel.
Let's do it. Stick him in the green room.
We have to have a little pre-show banter. Mr. Real, I understand that you took in some Shakespeare last night.
Oh my goodness. Cedar City has the Shakespeare Festival every year. They have a theater that is built to sort of resemble the Globe, not quite the same amount of seating, but very similar look. And I went last night and watched, is it The Winter's Tale?
A Winter's Tale, I think.
A Winter's Tale.
A Winter's Tale.
And the acting was phenomenal. Every line was the strangest way to convey an idea. It was, a normal Shakespeare script. The play was gorgeous. There's things I want to ask you, but I won't do that here. I'll do it away from the show. But folks, I'm just telling you, if you have not dipped your toes into Shakespeare, I finally took in the real authentic experience last night, and it was, the best word I have is, it was phenomenal. It was such a good time.
Wow, I'm glad you had a good time. And by the way, you were right. The first time it is The Winter's Tale. I always get that goofed up. Is it the or is it a? But it's the. Yeah. Winter's Tale being an old expression that we would see as the equivalent today of an old wives' tale, maybe.
Yeah, and I'll say too, I don't think Shakespeare plays generally use magic, right? There's not usually magic that happens in the plays. Am I right in saying that?
Except for Macbeth, Midsummer Night's Dream, The Tempest. Sometimes
there's magic. The Winter's Tale has a couple of pieces where magic happens, and I wasn't quite expecting that in the beginning. I could sort of tell it was going there, but I didn't expect it in the beginning. But man, what a great man, Shakespeare, you're really good at what you do. I don't know if anybody knows this or not, but William Shakespeare is pretty dang good at writing plays. And I think part of the secret is saying all these things in the weirdest way to tell them, right? Like all of this lingo that is so unfamiliar. Anyway.
Yeah, yes. If you take weird out of there and put gorgeous in.
Yeah. It's just a unique way to say every single word. And it really draws your attention. You really have to pay attention. And the actors knew all their lines. Their acting, their outward mannerisms were amazing. It was just so good. I was so tickled.
Well, great. I'm glad you had a wonderful time. And I just wanted to let the audience know that you're broadening your horizons, and I'm taking partial credit for that.
Yeah, I didn't remember any quotes, so I won't be doing anything along the lines of what RFM does week to week, but I really enjoyed it. So
it's not a play known for its quotes.
No. Man, you talk about a guy who just doesn't listen to the evidence in front of him. And we have sort of the opposite kind of guy with us tonight. We've got Dan Vogel.
Yes.
Who loves to look at the evidence and be able to change his mind when the evidence is overwhelming, unlike the star of The Winter's Tale. Dan Vogel, how are you doing tonight?
Great. I try to be very careful so I don't have to change my mind.
There you go. Well, this is going to be part deux. So the name of the show tonight, by the way, I'll do what RFM always does, which I think is helpful when people are trying to have a reference point. It is June 26, 2024, Wednesday night. We started at 6:20 p.m., actually 6:21. And the title of tonight's show is Who Factually Saw the Gold Plates, Part Deux, A Marvelous Work and a Blunder, Mormonism Live, number 185, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. So
yes, right up there on my screen.
Yep. So let's jump into it. I'm going to put up here on the screen the slideshow, and I'll just really quickly, I want to review some of the things we showed last week. Theodore Turley's 1845 report of John Whitmer's statement. Whitmer says that they were shown the plates in the experience with the 8 witnesses. By the way, in a different account, it's not as trustworthy. It seems like there were 2 groups of 4. But again, that source is questionable. This source is more credible. And John Whitmer points to the 8 witness experience, the plates being shown to him by a supernatural power. Then you have Stephen Burnett's April 1838 report of Martin Harris's public statements. In here, he says in a public, Martin Harris stated in public that he never saw the plates with his natural eyes, only in vision or imagination. Neither Oliver Cowdery, David Whitmer, and also the 8 witnesses never saw them with their natural eyes, and they hesitated to sign, and he says instrument, but to sign the witness statement for that reason, but were persuaded to do it. And then we have Stephen Burnett, 1838, same account. Harris arose and said he had hefted the plates repeatedly in a box with only a tablecloth or handkerchief over them, but never saw them, only as he saw a city through a mountain. And he also, Harris in the same statement says that he wished he had never came forward and said anything negative about the 8 witnesses, and that it was picked out of him. Had it not been picked out of him, he would not have said such. Then we've got John A. Clark, 31 August 1840. And he keeps getting pushed. Your natural eyes, your bodily eyes. And finally, he says, why I did not see them as I do that pencil case, yet I saw them with the eye of faith. I saw them just as distinctly as I see anything around me, though at the time they were covered over with a cloth. So several statements that they see the plates, but it's a spiritual vision, that the plates are there, they're under a cloth, and that the spiritual gift allows them to see the plates through the cloth, is sort of how I think the reasonable explanation of some of these statements would be. And then we had this strange one from Josiah Stoll, that when Joseph brought the plates to the house, he saw a corner of it, and it resembled a stone of a greenish cast. So not golden plates, like the church would like us to believe at this point, the apologists would like us to believe, but a stone of greenish cast. So maybe just a green rock under that sheet. And then we talked about the Mary Whitmer experience she had in seeing Moroni, and what the church and its apologists leave out when they talk about this is that just before Mary Whitmer's experience, we're told that David Whitmer and Oliver Cowdery and Joseph Smith see the angel Moroni go reside underneath the shed at their home, and the shed is just built on the ground. So as RFM has pointed out in previous episodes on the life of Moroni, that it would make more sense if it was a toad, or sort of connecting to Mark Hoffman, a salamander. But also in that same statement, the document points to Moroni telling the brethren that he was heading to Cumorah, obviously the hill in Palmyra, and that's also something that the church apologists want nothing to do with. Most of them place the Book of Mormon in Mesoamerica, and so they like using this statement for the thing that it gives them, but then they obfuscate the pieces of this statement that they don't want to deal with, such as Moroni living under the shed and the hill Cumorah being the hill in New York. And then we'll start here tonight. Dan, this is an extra slide that you put in just in the last few days. Help run us through what we're talking about here.
Yeah, so this is Hiram Smith. He's one of the 8 witnesses. And the reason why I brought this in was to clarify what Burnett reported Harris saying about seeing the plates with the spiritual eye. And so people were questioning the 8 witnesses. We discussed John Whitmer in Missouri saying that he saw them through a supernatural power. And that's not what you would expect if it were a naturalistic experience of the 8 witnesses. Now, Hiram is traveling from Ohio to Missouri, and he passes through Sunbury, Ohio, which is only a few miles from where I'm at right now. And while he's there, Sally Parker, who lives there, wrote a letter to, I believe it was her brother, John Kempton, on the 26th of August, 1838. So all these sources we're quoting are in 1838. And it's not just one offhanded statement here and there. This is a historical event with the dissenters in Kirtland, Ohio, and just trying to decide whether they're going to leave the Book of Mormon in their new founded church. And they all are unhappy with Joseph Smith's leadership, but half of them are uncertain as to whether they should retain the Book of Mormon or not. And so they were like Burnett. He was giving up the Book of Mormon because there was no evidence that there were any plates. So Sally Parker writes, I have not heard but one sermon since we have been in the place, and that by Hyrum Smith. He was moving to Missouri. He tarried with us a little while. His discourse was beautiful. We were talking about the Book of Mormon, of which he is one of the witnesses. He said he had but 2 hands and 2 eyes. He said he had seen the plates with his eyes and handled them with his hands. Why I write this is because they dispute the book so much. That is the dissenters up in Kirtland. Now, when Hyrum says he has but 2 hands and 2 eyes, that acknowledges that the dissenters are claiming the 8 witnesses saw the plates with their spiritual eyes. And that's Martin Harris's lingo more than anyone else's. And it's not too much unlike what David Whitmer said in 1886. He made a similar kind of statement. I've been asked if we saw those things with our natural eyes. Of course, they were our natural eyes. There is no doubt that our eyes were prepared for the sight, but they were our natural eyes nevertheless. So Hyrum Smith is not necessarily denying a visionary experience. He's saying that he actually saw them with his eyes, not his spiritual eyes. So it's really ambiguous, but it still nails down what the dissenters and Martin Harris were saying in Kirtland.
Yeah, it would be fair for apologist or the church to use this quote as evidence that the experience was real. And what he's also tipping his hat to is that there's a significant number of people in the area because they dispute the book so much. This isn't just 1 or 2 people. This has to be somewhat significant, that there's enough people around who are complaining that the witnesses did not have a physical experience. Okay.
Right.
Perfect. All right, let's play the next clip.
The angel places?
Yes. There's a kind of table in front of him and places the plates on the table, along with some other objects.
Yeah, David describes a table appearing next to the angel with different records and artifacts on it, and that the angel takes them and turns the leaves individually so that they can see. And they witness this experience. They also hear the voice of God.
And what does
testify that the book is true.
Okay. Yeah.
So what I want to ask here is, David describes this. Is David consistent from explanation to explanation, Dan, in regards to whether this is sort of how he frames this experience all throughout his life? And do the other 2 of the 3 witnesses express their perspective of what their experience was like by talking about a table and there's items upon them?
Well, David Whitmer does talk about the other items, but D&C 17, which is the revelation given before the 3 witnesses go into the woods to see the plates, D&C 17 promises that they will be able to see these other items. So there's an expectation built up that is fulfilled in the experience. But do we have 3 simultaneous witnesses? We don't know. We know at the minimum, Martin Harris sees them separately than what David Whitmer does. And Oliver Cowdery only gives a statement that it was broad daylight when they had the vision, and then asks the guy, is this juggling? You judge for yourself whether this is juggling or not, implying that they know how that things can be built up and visions can be conjured up in very psychological means. And at the time of the revivals, this is going around, there are people that are anti-revivalists who try to explain the things that go on in revivals as overheated imaginations. So they know that there's a possibility of that. But what we really want to know is what kind of experience. We know it's a vision. No one's hiding the fact that it's a vision. But what kind of vision is this? Is it that the angel comes down right there and the angel and the plates are literally there? They just descend from heaven and boom, they're physically, literally there, present to be seen? Or is it a full-on vision, where it's kind of a extra sensory kind of a thing, a inward subjective experience? What kind are we talking about? Well, Richard Anderson, reading the testimony of three witnesses, wants to make it as literal, physical as possible, and you'll hear Casey talk about that it's a concrete experience. I don't know if that is going to be on the tape that you include, but he does say in this video, it's a concrete experience. Well, David Whitmer made it clear, especially on one occasion at least, that it was not. And this is, if we could get my slide up, David Whitmer's interview with James Henry Moyle.
This one's really interesting.
Yeah, there we are. So this is subjective aspects of Whitmer's experience were brought out in an 1885 interview conducted by James Henry Moyle, who noted in his diary at the time, Mr. D. Whitmer Sr. did not handle the plates, only saw them, says he did see them and the angel and heard him speak, but it was indescribable that it was through the power of God. He then spoke of Paul, that is Apostle Paul, hearing and seeing Christ, but his associates did not, meaning if anybody else was in the woods at the time, they would not have seen anything, because it was only seen in spirit. I was not fully satisfied with the explanation. It was more spiritual than I anticipated. And so the next slide, Moyle talks about it again, this episode, referring to his journal. In 1928, Moyle was appointed president of the Eastern States Mission. In 1945, he gave an address about his interview with Whitmer. I had just graduated in law. He was the first witness I ever attempted to cross-examine, and I did so with all the intensity of my impelling desire to know the truth. The interview lasted 2.5 hours. I exhausted all my resources, and he was very kind and willing to aid me. There was only one thing that did not fully satisfy me. I had difficulty then, as I have now, to describe just what was unsatisfactory. I wrote in my diary immediately on my return home that in describing the scene in the woods, he was somewhat spiritual in his explanations and not as materialistic as I wished. That was my description then, and I cannot make it any clearer now. He said it was indescribable, that it was through the power of God. He then spoke of Paul hearing and seeing Christ, and his associates did not, because it was only seen in the spirit. I asked if the atmosphere about them was normal. Then he said it was indescribable, but the light was bright and clear, yet apparently a different kind of light, something of a soft haze, I concluded. So here, Whitmer, we have a very good interviewer, unlike a lot of believers that would come up and say, did you really see the angel? And Whitmer would say, yeah, I saw the angel. And that would be it. It was a vision, and that's all they would know. Well, here, when Moyle asks especially about the atmosphere around them was normal, this is a very important question to researchers of the paranormal even now, which is, if it's an artificial light, it's part of the vision. It's not just the light that the messenger has brought. It's changed the scenery around. It's not just light in the environment. It's light that is created by the vision. So the light, everything has changed the atmosphere, and it is a full-on vision. It's not a natural, supernatural event that or a concrete event that some of the apologists would like to believe it was.
Isn't it remarkable that we have a speaker who apparently has some degree of leadership in the church by this point? By the way, was it 1945 or 25, Dan?
1945.
Well, he's somewhat of an older fellow at this time.
Well, he interviewed, he was a young man when he interviewed Whitmer in 86, it was?
It's 60 years later.
85. Right. Yeah.
60 years later. And what I'm thinking about is, I know he has his journal to help refresh his recollection and everything, but I just can't imagine sitting there in sacrament meeting and hearing an old guy in the church be this honest about an interview he had with one of the three witnesses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a rare testimony. Plus, he knows what to ask, and part of how he knows what to ask is towards the end of the later 19th century, spiritualism was all the rage, and people were investigating the spiritualists and their wrappings and supernatural appearances of ectoplasm and things like that. So,
Dan, do you know why it was that he would have been put off to some degree by the spiritual nature of the description of this vision, when today, at least, and we talk about the three witnesses, it's described as explicitly a spiritual kind of experience? It's a vision.
Yeah.
It's a vision. It's a vision, but when in reading the testimony, the published testimony, it doesn't talk about any light or glory, or it gives the impression that the angel is literally there, just like what Richard Anderson, how he tried to reconstruct both groups' experiences with the plates by reading the testimony itself. And that's a dangerous thing to do, as we see here when we get subsequent statements from David Whitmer. We find out that it's a real subjective, full-on spiritual vision, that and it's not an actual visitation, from heaven, a visitation condescending, like Joe Smith makes it sound like in his 1838 history of the angel in a conduit of light, condescending down, boom, teleporting from heaven. That's not what's going on. This is a totally inward experience. It's a full vision, and because it's a full-on vision, there is the possibility that you must entertain that it's a hallucination. You can't tell the difference between that and a real vision and a hallucination. And so we could get into more how to distinguish what a hallucination is like.
Yeah, and we'll jump into those kind of at the end with the slides you've got there. But RFM, I think it's a great point you make, which is it's already a spiritual experience. Why is everybody having a conniption fit about it being more spiritual than they thought? And I think it's what Dan just said, which is it seems to indicate that people who even expected it to be a spiritual experience saw it as more, they were being told it was more fuzzy, more muddied than that, more of a hallucination than an actual vision that, as you know, you say, Dan, if other people had been in the woods, they would have seen it too. And I think it's a great question to ask, RFM, because it points to there's something less than even a standard spiritual experience that they seem to be pointing to.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know about you, but if I'm one of the three witnesses and Joseph Smith is a person that I believe, as I once did, is a prophet who has direct communication with God, who receives a revelation from God saying that I'm going to be one of the witnesses and here's what I'm going to see, and it's dependent upon my faith, whether I see it, then I'm going to go into those woods with a lot of pressure to see something.
Yeah.
Well, they volunteered. And one of the so I often use the term hypnotism, but some people like Brian Hales will object. Mesmerism wasn't brought to the United States until the 1840s. Well, that's just a name of a certain phenomenon that has existed for thousands of years. But I use the term hypnotism because those who study hypnotism have ways of determining which people are more susceptible to hypnotism than others. They have like tests. You can psychological tests, you can fill out things or whatever. But one of the criteria for picking a good hypnotic subject is that they've had prior experiences. And they all have before Joseph Smith took them in the woods. So they're very fertile ground for which to offer suggestion, and then for them to take the suggestion and follow it. So just a few books. Here's one, Personality and Hypnosis. Certain personalities. Here's another one on hypnotic. It's too shiny, but hypnotic suggestibility. And these one criteria would be, that's interesting in Oliver Cowdery's case, is a thing called automaticity, which is where the hand can move subconsciously, like in the case of using dowsing rods, and Cowdery is a dowser. Also, like speaking in tongues, that's another form of automaticity, where they don't have control over the language that they're speaking, and it seems automatic. Well, that's an automaticity. So people like that are highly suggestible, very good subjects for what I would call suggestion, not necessarily hypnotism. Hypnotism is nothing like what you see on the stage. That's more of a performance. Some of it's fake. It's nothing like clinical use of hypnosis. So
there's another thing too, Dan, which is that the hypnotist also has experience. In other words, Joseph Smith is doing treasure digging as early as 13 years old. And there are examples of when they go out treasure digging where the treasure diggers feel like they've hit some solid chest with their shovel, only to have it then slip further into the earth and it's gone. And no treasure's ever found. Nobody really believes, even on the apologist side, nobody really believes there was buried Spanish bullion anywhere. That was just make-believe of some sort. Whether people believed it or not, whether Joseph Smith believed it or not, I guess that's the argument. But no one's actually saying there were actual buried treasures. And there are examples of Joseph at a really young age leading these expeditions and getting the treasure diggers to wholeheartedly experience things being in the ground, only to then have them slip further into the earth. So the hypnotist also has years of experience perceiving which people sort of fall for these things and which ones don't.
Yes. So I think Joseph Smith may have come across it if he didn't learn it from Walters the magician. But he may have accidentally stumbled on it when he gave suggestions about guardian spirits and various treasures and the money diggers. According to some of Hurlbut's witnesses, some of the money diggers saw a treasure guardian on a barn, and so when
a treasure guardian on a barn,
standing on a barn, on the top of a barn,
that sounds like a scene out of Signs.
And they
it's the
saw
opposite of being underneath a shed too.
Yeah. So, in suggesting that the treasure slipped away, in some accounts of money diggers, they actually hear the rumbling of the treasure moving through the earth, and or hear shrieks of the guardian, and they run away. So these are highly suggestible situations, and Joseph Smith may have stumbled across the power of suggestion, but it is the power of suggestion that was going on in the revivals, where people were being carried away in visions, or they would come up. This is faith healing, and is the power of suggestion, and speaking in tongues is also a power of suggestion. So this is something that's around in Joseph Smith's environment. It's just like it is now.
Dan, can I just bring that up to date and talk about modern revivals that I see on TV, where there's the preacher and the hand placed against the forehead of an individual, and they collapse on stage, or they'll start, shaking around on the floor, because it's part of the suggestion. It's part of what is expected of them, and it shows that they are having an experience with God, which is something that everybody who has come to this revival would like to have. It gives you a superior status of sorts.
Yeah, the falling power. The falling power, you can see that by various faith healers. And it was exercised in the revivals in Joseph Smith's day, where people, the famous Kentucky revival, was hundreds of people fell at once, uncontrollably. And in other revivals in lesser degree. So it was all around Joseph Smith. He knew he could have known about the falling power, about the power of suggestion, and we do learn. We get a detailed description of how he and Sidney Rigdon supposedly had a joint vision in 1832, when they were in a room with other people, and they had the vision of the three heavens, and Joseph Smith would say, "I see," and he would describe it, and Sidney Rigdon would say, "I see it too," and then he would say, "I see," and Joseph Smith would say, "I see it too," and they went back and forth in this manner, and so that, I think, it might be at play here in this, especially with the three witnesses that we're talking about now, that Joseph Smith led. So one account that David Whitmer gives is even after Harris left, and it was Joseph Smith, Oliver Cowdery, and David Whitmer. Evidently, they continued praying, but they had stopped and were sitting on a log together, conversing about. David Whitmer doesn't say what they were conversing about, but then the vision suddenly came upon them. Well, I believe that they're conversing. Joseph Smith is talking about, he's the leader. He says, "Well, the angel is here now with the plates. If you have faith, you will see him." And I believe that's the introduction to what's going on. And Joseph Smith says that the voice of the Lord is declaring this, and says it, and that's what they hear. So, but we don't have enough information. We'll talk about this later. Enough information to say they all had the same vision.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Again, I think when we look at all these collectively, Dan Peterson and Stephen Harper, and again, I forget the third guy's name, but they are so certain about the things they say and to the people they're speaking to, but they don't really leave a lot of room for the reality of the differences in these accounts. So, all right, we'll put the next one up here and see what's in this one.
What I take from this is the witness here is not simply that Joseph Smith has a stack of plates. Some really impressive scholars who don't believe the Book of Mormon have said, yeah, easy enough, right? He can cobble together a stack of 10 plates in his dad's shop.
Okay, that's my favorite part. That was my favorite part. That's where he says out loud the part you're not supposed to say. Peterson is looking at him for a second, and he looks down, thinking, you're killing me, Paul. What? Shut up. You're not supposed to be saying that out loud. And then, incredibly, not only does Steve Harper in the church historian's office, not only does he say it, they leave it in. They don't cut it out. Are you one of those well-respected scholars that he's talking about, Dan, who say that
I'm the one who's
together in a shed?
Yeah, I would say that I started it in recent times anyway. And Taves, who is a scholar at Riverside University, California at Riverside, believes that that's probably what happened.
Can I underscore something, Dan, before you go on? I apologize. I just want to make sure this is really clear. Steve Harper from the church historian's office says that there are a couple of really good scholars who say Joseph Smith could have just cobbled these plates together in a barn or in a shed. He does not disagree with that. He tacitly agrees with it, that is a possibility. And I was blown away by that.
He goes on to say that's why the other items were also seen on a table in front of the angel. There was a table that had the sword of Laban, the breastplate, the Liahona, the brass plates. And so that he goes on to say that makes it more physical, more material, more like it's more about the book. It's not just about the plates that anybody could probably put together. And he's implying that, so Lehi had the Liahona, so Lehi was a real person, right? And the sword of Laban, would be Nephi, and Laban was a real person. And so he goes on like that, but this is a vision, So if the 8 witnesses saw all those items, that would be really impressive. But it was the 3 witnesses in a vision that saw all of these things and didn't touch any of them, didn't touch the plates, right? So it's just a vision. You could have anything in the vision. Well, and the DNC 17 set up what they were going to see. So they had to see this.
Can I just say that whatever damage he's doing to the 3 witnesses, Stephen Harper is completely obliterating the testimony of the 8 witnesses.
Yeah, well, they are religious their religious testimony that is not any different than other religious testimony. That's my point.
I want to play this again because RFM, I think this is a big deal. He gives credibility to the idea that it would be maybe better than feasible. It would be possible. There is a likelihood that the capacity of folks around Joseph Smith or Joseph Smith himself could create the plates. By the way, Dan, you won't remember this. In a very early episode of Mormonism Live, I reached out to you for your thoughts on Moroni and Joseph and the time period of the 5 years that Joseph had from 1822 to 1827. And you suggested to me on the phone that when Joseph comes back to the house with a disjointed finger, that one explanation for that is that whatever it took to bend the metal rods into the D-shaped rings to bind the plates, Joseph might have sprained his finger doing that act, putting the plates together. And that would explain why Joseph has a jammed finger. And then when you get back to the house, you have to explain why you have a jammed finger. And of course, people were chasing you all through the woods. I don't know if you remember that conversation or not, but it plays well into what Stephen Harper just says. So let me play this again.
Let's see this again.
What I take from this is the witness here is not simply that Joseph Smith has a stack of plates. Some really impressive scholars who don't believe the Book of Mormon have said, yeah, easy enough, right? He can cobble together a stack of tin plates in his dad's shop.
Impressive scholars. Some impressive scholars say that he could put these plates together, and I agree, he could do it. But because there's other items, this is not that kind of experience.
Right. That's what he seems to be implying. And I go, well, it's the vision. It's what's so impressive about that. And have the 8 witnesses see all those things, and that would be harder for Joe Smith to make. So I think he wasn't thinking what he was saying through very well.
He wasn't. This is the point at which sometimes it will happen. When a person is up there, I'm not going to say lying. I'm just going to say that their job is to present one side of the story when they know the other side. But they're not supposed to say the other side. They're just supposed to say their one side. And every now and again, a switch will flip in the brain's synapse will misfire. And all of a sudden, he finds himself saying the part that he's not supposed to say.
Right.
Well, he probably made it up on the spur of the moment there, and thought it would be, an added evidence and proof for the witnesses, but it isn't.
I like to call that scene where Stephen Harper kisses Dan Vogel's ring.
Yeah.
I can't say he was talking about me, but
definitely critics.
But I don't know who else he would be talking about.
Yeah,
it's you.
By the way, I don't know if I added this slide or if somebody else did, but just to note that there have been attempts to use the old-fashioned process and make plates out of tin that were similar. I think this is an episode of Mormon Stories that does exactly that thing. And then I want to note, Joseph soon received another intimation of the approach of the mob, the necessity of removing the record and breastplate again from its hiding place. He took them up and carried them out to the cooper shop. A cooper shop is not exactly a tin worker, but in a cooper shop, you might make barrels, for instance. You've got bands of metal. You have to be able to work with metal in order to do certain projects with the wood. And so we do have some indication that the Smith family had some of these skills that would have been required for somebody to fabricate a set of 10 plates. And Dan, do you want to say anything about that? RFM, do you want to say anything about that?
2 things.
I don't think he did it in the cooper shop.
Yeah. I'm just noting that there are certain skills on the property that have to do with being able to work with bands of metal. Yeah. And so RFM, go ahead, and then I'll let you, Dan, say what you do think went on there. But go ahead.
In the background of my picture here, I don't know if you want to make it any bigger, Bill, but you'll see right under the RFM neon sign a copy of those plates that were made by the same individual, I'm pretty sure. And he had an extra set left over, asked me if I'd like them. I said, sure. And he shipped them to me. So they're back there. Let me just show you. Once again, I'm not sure if this is the same person, and I wouldn't want, well, anyway, it's back there if you can see it. Can you see it's a bit hazy because I'm focused?
Yeah, I'm gonna make yours. Let me.
Yeah, there it is back there. And you can see those plates.
Okay. Is there a chance that are they really heavy? Is there a chance you could show them
They're
to
very
the audience?
heavy, and I'm not going to.
Okay,
and the reason why is because the edges are so sharp.
Oh,
that they've already cut me once when I was putting them over there. It's just amazing. They could have been maybe hasped a bit, but that would have been quite a bit of work just to
do they have some heft to them?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of heft to them. I think it gave the local mail deliverer a hernia bringing those to me.
Do you have a guess on how much they weigh?
No.
I was going to have you run down the hallway and back and let us know how easy that was.
Yes, that would be death by 1,000 cuts.
Okay, there you go. And then Dan, what do you want to say about how the Smiths, how Joseph or anyone who you think might have helped him, how he might have fabricated something in order to at least under a sheet or from a distance convince people that he had plates?
Well, on Mormon Stories, the gentleman that made them was a tinsmith, And he wondered how long it would take, and he said it only had a couple hours, maybe. So I think, so as I've argued before, that Joseph Smith had wasn't going every year to the hill to talk to the messenger. It had ended in 1824 after the death of Alvin, and he didn't go again. He took Samuel Lawrence up there to get a second witness that the plates were there. Samuel Lawrence looked in his stone and said he could see the plates and some large spectacles on top. But that was like 1825, but he didn't probably go in 1826. Then all of a sudden he comes home and tells his parents, "Hey, the messenger stopped me. He had gone to Manchester on an errand, and he came back home late. And Lucy and Joseph Sr. were worried about Joseph coming home late. What happened? Where were you?" And Joseph says mysteriously, "I've received the most severest chastisement in my life." And they said, Joseph Sr. gets his back up and says, "I would like to know who did that. How dare they talk to you that way?" And Joseph Smith goes, "Oh, settle down, Father. Hold yourself here. It was the messenger of the Lord." I should say, Lord. And so I have not been to my duty. He chastised me because I need to be on with getting the plates. And so this, of course, was before September, September 22nd. So he gets the plates. This is like really close to the time, I guess. He gets the plates. He goes to the hill with Emma in Joseph Knight Sr.'s wagon. And I believe meanwhile, the reason why he was late was because he was busy hiding tin and materials to build the plates in the woods near the hill. Maybe he was doing some more in the days preceding. There's all sorts of tin around the environment. There's tin roofs. Tin roofs are especially on chicken coops and outhouses and things like that. And tin doesn't rust really. And so it's a good material to put on the roof of various places. But maybe in Manchester, he sees a stash of tin. There's tinsmiths everywhere, and they probably have a pile of scrap tin around. Maybe he's gathering buckets and cutting those up, but he gets enough tin. It could be any size. He doesn't go, "Oh, I got my 6 inches for my plates. I got the right." He uses whatever he found and whatever he got. So he didn't have a predetermined amount he had to get or anything. So he was ready to go, and he went up on the hill. He probably had to do some cutting, and he made a little pattern of one, and then punched holes and used that as a pattern for other holes. And you can use a nail or a spike or some sort of thing. It's not too hard. And so you finally get a stack on 3 rods. And there's rods around. Rods are, like I said before, used for handles of buckets, wrap them around buckets or barrels, and that's the cooper's shop part. Especially even straps of iron, could go around. And it doesn't have to be all tin. It could be iron, copper, whatever he gets.
Yeah. By the way, can I jump in here for just a second and show something up on the screen? So I did a Sunstone symposium presentation, Moroni's gold plates, were they real? And what I did, a chemist who is an acquaintance of mine, listener to the show, follower of our work, said, "Bill, it wouldn't be that hard to take these kinds of metals." And by the way, Luman Walters was a sort of alchemist. We believe at least the possibility and probably the likelihood that Joseph Smith at least received some tutelage under him. And so if I get rid of the Sunstone, by the way, Sunstone, Moroni's gold plates, were they real? You can go listen to that. That's the session where Spencer Lake tries to carry 60 pounds of plates and he doesn't get very far. This is all the same metal, by the way. And he showed me how you can take tin or copper and you can do certain chemical reactions that are really easy, that I did it in like 10 minutes with a frying pan. And I can't remember what the chemical was, but it was something common to the day of 1830. And I was able to take lighter metals such as tin and make them change color to either appear gold, or to take copper and to make it appear silver, or silver to make it appear copper. And so to give something a golden color isn't out of this world. The one that's gold colored there was not gold to begin with. I did that during Sunstone. And so there are alchemist processes by which folks can do these things. And so it's not out of this world for Joseph to give metal a golden color when it's not really gold at all, and it's not Tembaga at all either. So anyway,
that's if you were going for a set of plates that might pass visual inspection, you know. And if I were Joe Smith and I knew about that, I would probably bring just one out and say, here's a sample of the stack of plates, and I would etch just that one, you know.
Yeah.
But he never did that. His plates, to me, what I concluded was that he could not produce any plates that could pass visual inspection. So at any rate, so he goes up on the hill and he's trying to make these plates, and he runs out of time because he starts pretty late and the sun's coming up and he needs to get home, the wagon home and all that. So he has them hit it in the woods, in a hollow log, probably, really the real stuff, the stuff he's using. And 10 days later, he goes after them to bring them home. So I believe he goes out and he finishes making the plates, and the last move he would make would be to bend the rings around the stack.
Right.
And so if you think of it, if you're holding an iron rod, you're going to try to bend it. It's going to put a lot of pressure on your thumb. And especially when you start turning it to make the ring. And I believe he injured his thumb somehow, and he needed an explanation. And the fight with the three ruffians, as Lucy remembered them, was to cover up for the thumb being injured. Anyway, so he brings them home, wrapped in a sack, puts them in the box immediately, you know.
And that's when Stoll sees the is that when Stoll sees the green rock?
Well, according to Stoll,
yeah,
Joe Smith hadn't handed them in the window to him. All this stuff is left out of the story somehow. But so I have an image in my head because I've reconstructed it, and it just doesn't really follow what I've reconstructed. But so anyway, that's the plates, how to make the plates. It's not that hard. The only thing is, you know, why couldn't anyone see them, and why didn't he show them to more people, and why so selective and controlled? Why such controlled situations, you know, just like a magician?
Dan, I have to ask this question because there are certain interested parties in the audience, but are there any of the three witnesses' statements anywhere that say that in addition to the plates, the liahona, and the sword of Laban on the table, that there was also a monkey in a box?
No. Well, that monkey in the box, of course, is Lemuel or Copley. Lehman?
Yeah, and it was by the
Copley.
side of the road. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
we went over that on
in E.D. Howe's book. In E.D. Howe's book.
Yes. We still haven't gotten over the monkey in the box.
How much?
The monkey in the box.
What was the cost to see the monkey in the box? Do you remember?
2 pennies, I think.
2 pennies.
It was either
As long as you don't spank the monkey.
Yeah, you can't spank the monkey. That's a bad thing to do. You bad monkey. Bad monkey. All right.
It's 2 bits to spank the monkey. It's only 2 pennies to see it.
Okay, here we go. This is the next clip, and I think this is the one where Harper says something about the part that came right after.
These plates are ancient. They're real. They have actual writing on them. people did that actual writing, and they talk about the material artifacts in the writing. Well, here are some of those material artifacts, and they span the time range of the Book of Mormon. Right? I have the brother of Jared's seer stones. I got Laban's sword. I've got Lehi's Liahona. It's a way of saying Lehi is a real person, and he really was directed through the Arabian Peninsula with this marvelous object that God gave him. The brother of Jared really was a real person, and he really did behold the Lord, and the Lord touched 16 stones to light his barges and gave him another pair, these ones, so that this record and others could be translated. It's a way of bearing witness to the Book of Mormon in a way that's more robust than just saying the book is true.
Right. So I just wanted to mention that they write down their formal statement, which has appeared in every copy of the Book of Mormon ever since, almost immediately after. But it's not long after that, too, that they start sharing their experiences. There's a letter from about 2 months after where Oliver Cowdery describes what happens and writes about seeing an angel in the bright light of day. And he's talking about it in concrete, substantial terms. So sometimes people try to spiritualize the three witnesses by saying, well, they didn't touch anything. But Oliver is using very concrete terms to describe it, as do the others throughout the rest of their lives.
So that's where the concrete comes from. The word concrete, he uses it twice there. But you had said that something different about Oliver's recounting of the vision. I thought that you had said that he's kind of ambiguous about what was actually seen. He just talks about it being in the light of day, and if this is judgment.
Yeah, he doesn't describe it in very much detail.
So it's not very concrete?
Well, I don't know. He's answering the letter of inquiry, well, let's see if you want to. I have it here.
And don't know seems not concrete, right? Concrete is, this is what I saw. And by the way, when they say the other witnesses testified about these things through the rest of their life, they're intentionally ignoring the times that they didn't, where they said something that was spiritual.
So Cowdery's, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Cowdery says, this is a letter, 29th of November, 1829, written to Cornelius C. Blatchley. And he says, in answer to, it's in the Gospel Luminary, it was a clear, open, beautiful day, far from any inhabitants, in a remote field at the time we saw the record of which it has been spoken, brought and laid before us by an angel, arrayed in glorious light, who descended, I suppose, in brackets, the publisher put, out of the midst of heaven. Now, if this is human juggling, judge ye. Because and that's all he says. He laid the plates before them, and it's just like the published testimony. It just says the angel came in and laid the plates before them, and it doesn't say much of anything else. And that's the deal. I mean, it doesn't tell you the circumstances. It doesn't tell you Joseph Smith's there. It doesn't say we went out into the woods. Like Cowdery gives a little more information here than the published testimony, but the published testimony doesn't say anything. It just says an angel came and laid the plates before us. That means you can't get any sparser than that.
A couple of things that strike me. First is that I really think that Stephen Harper knows he cocked up when he said that stuff about the plates in the Cooper shop. Yeah. Because everything after that point, he is over the top in his enthusiasm for talking about what happened. I mean, we even get to the point, which is another one of my favorite parts of the show, when a college-educated guy who works in the church historians department is so exercised that he says, these ones. That was amazing. So I think he's really going over the top there, and I think you can see it, and I think you can see Conan, Conan O'Brien there, sitting looking at him like, geez,
Casey?
No, Scott Christopher.
Oh.
I think he looks a little bit like Conan O'Brien. You see him. They cut to Conan. He's looking at him and say, what are you on, man? What are you doing? It's like you're going crazy here. But that's one thing. The second thing is that they have a cutaway to these plates behind a rock while they're talking.
Yeah.
That's the different set of plates. Okay. That's the different description of the plates. Remember the plates from last time where they put them on the stump for the 8 witnesses in the recreation? That is a very different, much wider dimension, much shallower set of plates. And now behind the rock, they cut away to the more classic description of the plates being like 6 by 8 inches, maybe in 8 inches deep.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going back and forth between alternate descriptions, which presumably would be of the same set of plates. But they're doing that because they know why they're doing it, because there's 2 different descriptions, but they're not letting the audience in on what's going on.
Yeah. Okay. Here is the next clip.
Were all 3 witnesses here for the dedication of this edifice?
Yes.
So they were witnesses as well to all of the different spiritual manifestations, the appearances of angels that people describe happened, and those. So they were here for that full-on Pentecostal celebration, as it were.
So again, it's striking that what eventually happens to them, they're falling away from the church, happens so rapidly after this high point in 1836, which is an astonishing thing for all of them. And then within a year, they're gone. There's a great lesson to be learned in that, I think.
Wait, what would you say it is?
Interfere with your spiritual witness. They never lost their witness. They remain faithful to that, but they are so irritated by certain things.
This is another one of my favorite parts of the entire show, where our friend Scott Christopher asks the dumb question. He asks the stupidest question, because here's Dan Peterson saying something he said 1,000 times before. The guy next to him, who's in the black, nods his head, because it's supposed to be understood what it is he's saying. That there's a lesson in this for all of us, that these guys were 3 witnesses and they're here for the Pentecostal experience in 1836 in the Kirtland Temple. And a year or 2 later, they've fallen away. There's a lesson in that for all of us. And then, of course, Scott Christopher has to say, what would you say that lesson is? This is total Albert Brooks humor. I would expect that he was the director of this. And I can't see this without thinking, did they do this on purpose to be funny? Because I find it hysterical.
The other thing, too, I think that's at least interesting here is there is some conversation. It's something I actually might want to tackle in an episode with you, RFM, at some point in the future. But I know Rebecca mentioned it in our news show, and I know Dan has some feelings on this too. But at the very least, the mentions of all of the messengers who come in the Kirtland Temple, that some of those accounts are quite late. There doesn't seem to be anything contemporaneous. And I think, Dan, maybe you pointed out, but there was a thought that these messengers, such as Elias and Elijah and the sealing keys and all that kind of stuff, that they were yet to come, not coming in the Kirtland Temple, and that it's a late addition to the historical narrative that they showed up at that time to give those keys in Kirtland. And so there are some questions about that we sort of hit a little bit on the news show. And so I simply want to mention it. But yeah, Dan states the obvious and Scott doesn't pick up on it, and he needs to ask the question. And
they left it in.
Yeah. And maybe Dan was not really looking to explain it, then he had to explain it. Yeah.
You can actually see he's just a little bit miffed that one of the students in his class, this is his special class though, in his gospel doctrine class, is asking a question that should be obvious to even the most ill-informed.
Anyway, Dan says, other things can interfere with their testimonies. For Cowdery, it was Joseph Smith's affair with Fanny Alger. For Harris, it was the Kirtland Bank. For David Whitmer, it was because he was president of the Missouri Church and Joseph Smith wanted he and his brother out of the way before he got there.
Yeah, and Whitmer, every Mormon should go read the All Believers in Christ pamphlet that Whitmer produced, because in there Whitmer says something like, if you believe I saw an angel then you should believe me just as much that I saw an angel now who told me to get out of here, get out of the church, leave.
Oh yes, and I've read this recently. He says the voice of the Lord came to him. It wasn't an angelic visitation, as I recall. He heard the voice of the Lord telling him, 1838 summer, I believe, get out of Dodge. You need to leave this place. You need to leave Joseph Smith. You need to leave this church. You need to go off and do something else. And he says that I heard the voice of the Lord tell me to leave in 1838, just as clearly as I heard the voice of the Lord declaring to me that the gold plates were the record of the Nephites in the vision that the three witnesses had.
Yeah. So if you're going to believe David Whitmer on the front end, he tells you that you also have to believe him on the back end, and hence leaving the church was under the same guidance as testifying that the Book of Mormon was true.
Yeah, that puts believing Mormons on the horns of a dilemma.
Yeah. Yeah. One that they often just ignore.
Well, David, with that statement also has implications for David Whitmer, since David Whitmer, when he says, if you believe my testimony, you believe this, when he accuses Joseph Smith of getting revelations from man, from God into the devil, he doesn't use the implications of that on himself. And so it's his statement isn't all that probative or whatever you want to say, because of he doesn't realize the shakiness of he's getting revelations. This is what happens with all your revelations aren't true, mine are.
Yes,
they all think that. But on the Kirtland Temple appearances, they did happen, I believe, at the time, but they had a different interpretation of why Elijah appeared. They were dispensational appearances. They had nothing to do with, like Brian Hale says, getting the keys for performing polygamous marriages or for baptisms for the dead that hadn't happened yet. So in the context of 1836, they weren't that big of a deal, and that Joseph Smith could have in Nauvoo been looking forward to another appearance of Elijah, that it hadn't happened. The one that was prophesied of hadn't happened yet. But the fact that Cowdery and Joseph Smith claimed to have seen Jesus and these other, Moses, Elias, and Elijah, that was just the end of it. Starting in 1834, Cowdery and Smith were testifying of seeing John the Baptist, and then it was Peter, James, and John, and then it was these angels. Well, the whole priesthood angelic ordination story account is so suspect that it puts his Book of Mormon testimony in jeopardy. Meaning there isn't necessarily multiple witnesses at all. Cowdery may not have been a witness, since what he did in Kirtland kind of puts a shadow on his Book of Mormon testimony, because he was willing to deceive in the mid 1830s. So it may be just only David Whitmer and Martin Harris separately. So there may not be multiple witnesses with the three witnesses after all.
So you're saying about Oliver Cowdery engaging in deception with the creation of the John the Baptist experience and the Peter, James, and John experience?
And it's very easy to show that those are concocted after the fact.
Richard Bushman says as much in Rough Stone Rolling as a faithful scholar, that the evidence is there that would be a rational way to see the information.
Right. And so that puts the book Cowdery's testimony in jeopardy. Even if it happened, he is such a person now that he had done that he's not in one of those, the category of a trusted witness.
Yeah.
Hey, Bill, before we go to the next clip, can you play the last clip again, just so everybody knows what's coming with this question? Because I find this endlessly amusing.
Were all three witnesses here for the dedication of this edifice?
Yes.
So they were witnesses as well to all of the different spiritual manifestations, the appearances of angels that people describe happened, and those. So they were here for that full-on Pentecostal celebration, as it were.
So again, it's striking that what eventually happens to them, they're falling away from the church, happens so rapidly after this high point in 1836, which is an astonishing thing for all of them. And then within a year, they're gone. There's a great lesson to be learned in that, I think.
What would you say it is?
That other things can interfere with your spiritual witness. They never lost their witness. They remain faithful to that, but they are so irritated by certain things.
Wait a second. You know, Dan Peterson was caught so off guard by that question.
Yeah.
That he actually contradicts himself. Did you notice his response? That they lost their spiritual witness. Oh, wait a second, he says in his head, now I've screwed it up. And so he immediately follows it up by saying they never lost their spiritual witness. I won't ask you to play it a third time, but every time I see this, I see new things in it.
And then that brings us to Martin Harris's final testimony on his deathbed. He's on his way out. This is the end and demise of Martin Harris. So here's Martin.
Were all three witnesses here for the dedication?
You like this as much as I do, don't you?
I should have just let it play at that point, huh? All right, here we go.
The bishop asked me to record your testimony. He did he? Young man, do you know?
By the way, I don't know if there's a kid present at the actual thing, because this isn't what Martin says here. We'll show you his testimony. By the way, pay close attention to the words they use. We'll show you Martin's testimony. There are differences, not drastic. But can you imagine if you're one of the three witnesses to the Book of Mormon and there's a little kid who's all in on the church and you could just ruin his day? Of course, you're not going to do that. Now, maybe there's no kid there. Maybe this is just dramatic effect. But at the very least, notice that you would sort of have to couch your words in a way that gave the kid what he needed. Anyway, all right, here we go.
This is what makes him special. People come to him. They want to talk to him. They want to hear him tell the story. He's going to tell the story.
Yeah, he's only got one more chance to do it anyway, so make it good.
Yeah.
The bishop asked me to record your testimony. He did he? Young man, do you know who I am?
Yes, sir.
Nancy, dear, would you open that window just a bit and let in a bit more light?
Of course.
Young man, do you see my hand?
Yes, sir.
Do you see that window over there?
Yes, sir.
Young man, just as surely as you can see my hand, or as surely as you see the sunlight coming in, I saw the plates. I saw the angel. I heard the voice of God. I know Joseph Smith was a true prophet and a true friend. I know the Book of Mormon is true.
And he's down for the count. You know, I want to say something about that actor. I thought he did a really good job in this scene. I mean, given what he had to work with, what he had to portray, I like it.
Well, you notice he never mentioned an angel, a light, or anything. You would, if you heard that, you would assume he actually saw the plates.
Do you see my hand?
Yeah.
Describe sunlight, by the way. In other words, if you say I like that sunlight over there, I saw the plates. That's not that's not really the thing you would choose to pick out to compare if you had a more tangible experience. Light isn't exactly tangible, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess he's on his deathbed. He can be excused for forgetting some details. What is the actual account that fellow who was sent by the bishop, who couldn't come for himself and ask the question, I guess, but who wants to send to write it down? So what does he actually write down, that fellow? By the way, do we know who that is? We must know who that is.
Do you know who that is, Dan? The person who wrote down Martin Harris's testimony?
Oh, Ole Jensen. Well, I have all the testimonies in my document series on early Mormon documents. There were several people that came. I don't remember the kid with Ole Jensen. Or it's Ola, actually. Ola Jensen. It's O-L-E.
Ole.
That's kind of what I say in my mind. But I went and listened to it on the internet, and it was Ola.
It's a good Scandinavian name.
Because I was curious. Well, he did write down the final testimony. I got
Yeah.
There's the
copies of
angel.
it.
I see
And
the
that's up
angel.
on the screen.
But the kid, there's 3 kids that went to see Harris also, but I thought that we were on different occasions than that. And basically, that's a statement, similar statement David Whitmer gave near his death also, about seeing, can you see this bed? That's how I saw the angel. I mean, he's telling Moyle, that it was a vision, and then at the end he's saying I saw it just as plain as you see this bed. I mean, so
So what is the final testimony then? This is different from what we just saw the scene of. Let me read this, okay? Because some people just listen to this audio and they don't watch it, Dan.
yeah.
This is Martin Harris's final testimony in your slide. I did see the plates on which the Book of Mormon was written. I did see the angel. I did hear the voice of God. And I do know that Joseph Smith is a prophet of God, holding the keys to the holy priesthood.
Yeah. And in the video, he makes a comment about Joseph is my friend. He's testifying of these same things, but he adds a few things to it. So I just want to note, not that this is any way refuting the faithful side of things. It actually seems to stand up for it. It is that the creators of this video took additional liberty when such isn't needed. You can really just have Martin say what he said, and instead they have him say more things, which is unnecessary. And it shows you that they really don't want to portray things the way they happened. They want to sort of nudge it everywhere along the way in this video. So there's that. Okay.
Can I just register disbelief that Martin Harris at the end of his life actually said Joseph Smith is a prophet of God? What do you think about that, Dan?
Well, these are the way they're recorded is not the best, form to receive this information. I mean, I don't think he wrote it down as Harris was saying it, but it was at the time.
You know what I mean by that, though, right?
I
That
don't.
Martin Harris would have thought that, he was a prophet once when he produced the Book of Mormon, but shortly after that, he fell.
And he is a prophet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't. It doesn't make it any stronger,
Right.
because he said it on his deathbed, because we're not accusing him of lying.
Right.
And that's usually what Richard Anderson is putting up this straw man all the time of it's either they were lying or telling the truth, either lying and they were reputable people that had respect in the community, and it's just like only dumb people see visions, and only liars, people that would be dishonest would be lying. Religious people lie, also if it's going to be for a good cause. You don't have to be unintelligent to have hallucinations. So
you don't have to be dumb to confuse a hallucination with a vision.
Exactly. It can happen to anybody, so it's a part of the human condition, which is awful strange. We all know that humans can hallucinate. So why does God send a vision that is very difficult to tell the difference from a hallucination?
Yep. Okay. All right. So now, Dan, what I want to put up on the screen now is, I think these are a couple of maybe 4 slides or so that you've got.
Or shakers?
So this is the Sacred Roland book.
Yeah. So this will give you an idea of what religious testimony is like, and these are like remarkably better than the 3 witnesses. So I'm just going to give you like a sampling, a taste of what it is, and this is a testimony of what's her name?
Sarah Lee?
No. Well, Ann Lee, you mean?
Ann Lee. I'm sorry. I was getting confused with The pound cake versus the Quakers.
No, this is her name's at the end. You'll see. Well,
okay.
It's one person we start off with in this little snippet here. On the Sabbath, the 6th of October, 1842. That's already more than what they 3 and 8 witnesses gave. As I came out of the meeting house after attending solemn worship, I heard the sound of a mighty trumpet, which caused me to raise my eyes to see from whence the sound proceeded. When I beheld an angel standing on the top of the center dwelling, holding in his right hand a trumpet, and in his left a roll of a book, instead of the gold plates, down at the next box. I saw no more of the angel after that time until the month of January 1843, when I again saw him bearing the roll in his hand. And he spake unto me in a loud and mighty voice, saying, I am a holy angel of power from the throne of my God, and I have come before you at this time in power and in truth. Okay, and then the next slide, it's Emily Babcock. That's it. Emily signed Emily Babcock. She also says, and gives another statement, I can now boldly testify and affirm that what I have here stated is the truth, and that I am willing to meet my Maker at any hour. I know that I am nothing but a frail mortal in the sight of my God, but that which is revealed to me by divine revelation and the power of the Almighty God, I know to be true. New Lebanon, New York, April 8th, 1843, Emily Babcock. Then below that, the 8 witnesses. We, the undersigned, hereby testify that we saw the holy angel standing upon the housetop, as mentioned in the foregoing declaration, holding the roll and book. 8 women, by the way. So they are Shakers, but so you have a situation in which one explanation would be that we have multiple hallucinators or multiple real witnesses to real vision and of an angel and plates. On what grounds do you reject these? And
I've got a grounds. By the way, can you go back to the original slide before this, where it says on the Sabbath, the 6th day of October, 1842. The Sabbath, I would presume, would be Sunday.
Yeah. Yes, I would think so.
When I look it up, 1842, October 6th was a Thursday.
There you go.
You can check me out on that. I've looked at 2.
The 6th day?
The 6th day of October was a Thursday.
Of 1842?
Yeah, I've checked it twice, and if those in the audience will double check it as well. So obviously, this is how we have caught these people in a fraud.
Oh, man.
So I was having trouble. I was having trouble with the phone line. I don't know if you guys can hear me, but I was having trouble with the phone line. Can you explain to me what you're saying here? Why? How does the date make it?
On the Sabbath, which we would presume would be Sunday.
Yeah.
On Sunday, the 6th day of October, 1842. Well, 1842, October 6th was a Thursday, not a Sunday.
Right. This has nothing to do with Mormonism, though. This is this is another religion.
Yes, I've proven the Shakers false.
The Shakers have been demonished. Yeah, by the way, it's all it takes often in looking at the critical side of things in Mormonism or any other system that makes claims that are demonstrably not true, is to just take an extra 10 seconds and look things up.
And by the way, honestly, look, when I say this, okay, I'm kidding, because I don't think getting the date wrong, even though you're only writing it half a year later, I think it was April of the next year, 1843, that she signed this thing. I don't hold that against somebody, because that's a mistake anybody could make, by which I mean it's a mistake I could make. So I don't want to judge somebody else and the veracity of the rest of their statement based upon their getting the date wrong. But I point that out just because I thought I would check it out and see if that were correct, expecting it would be, but being surprised to find out it was not.
And just
this is a publication also, so it
just
could be a mistake, but
yeah.
one other little note is that my sound all sort of did something different. I couldn't get into the call-in studio. So folks, if you called, I could see that you got in. I had to constantly end the call-in studio session, restart it. Finally, my phone rang through. And when it did, the sound on my end sort of self-corrected. So everything sort of changed from where it was in the beginning of the show for me. So anyway, if you did try to call in, please call back. And there are a few calls in the call-in studio, but we'll finish up here. So, okay.
Yeah, we're almost done.
Yep. October 6th, here they're having the same sort of thing. They've got witnesses, they're having spiritual experiences. And of course, they're not true because they make different claims than Mormonism does.
Yeah. So now I want to introduce the audience to those who study apparitions, and particularly in this case, we want to know about multiple witnesses, collective hallucinations, and how they go about studying them. And this has nothing to do with Mormonism. Okay, so this is collective or group hallucinations has been observed in various settings outside Mormonism. I'll introduce this by saying that. An example of this phenomenon is the reported appearances of the Virgin Mary at Lourdes and other places. In Lebanon, New York, in the 1840s, the visionary experiences of the Shakers are not unlike what the Book of Mormon witnesses reported. Then we read those, and then
Oh, you want the next one?
No.
Okay, sorry.
In their study of group hallucinations, British psychologists Celia Green and Charles McCreery found that the participants only apparently experienced the same apparition. We do not know how precise the correspondence is between the images perceived by the various subjects they explain. Even in cases where the reports reveal no discrepancies, we cannot be sure that there were not some which did not emerge from the verbal statement. As a matter of fact, quite wide discrepancies could exist between the perceptions of one person and those of another without attracting any attention. So we're dealing with what only appears sometimes to be the same, seeing the same apparition. In the next slide, psychologist Leonard Zuzna, and Warren H. Jones explain the phenomenon of collective hallucination. It is expectation that plays the coordinating role in collective hallucination. Although the subject matter of individual hallucinations has virtually no limits, the topics of collective hallucinations are limited to certain categories. These categories are determined first by the kinds of ideas that a group of people may be excited about as a group. For emotional excitement is a prerequisite of collective hallucinations.
Check, we got that.
The most common causes of emotional excitement in groups are religious, and indeed phenomena related to religion are most often the subject of collective hallucinations.
Check, we got that.
Yeah, good. Second, the categories are limited by the fact that all participants in the hallucination must be informed beforehand. Check.
Yes, absolutely.
At least
make sure you got to the end of the sentence at least, but yes.
At least concerning the broad outlines of the phenomenon that will constitute the collective hallucination.
And here it was much more than just broad, it was specific.
Yeah. This may take the form of a publicly announced prophecy, for example, or someone suddenly looking up and saying, "Lo in the sky," or words to that effect. Things in the sky, or at least overhead, are the most commonly seen collective hallucinations. Radiant crosses, saints, religious symbols, flying objects, sometimes all these in combination. Once the general type of hallucination is established, it is easy to harmonize differences in the accounts. This may take place during the hallucination, if they're like communicating, or in subsequent conversations, which it happens in any group of witnesses. If they are allowed to talk to each other and cross-contaminate each other, they will actually change each other's memory of the event. This is what has been observed, and I spoke about in association with the Spalding theory recently. Then you have a statement. You provide a statement, bare-boned statement, that's much easier for if there's different things that we're seeing, much easier for them to sign. It doesn't.
Everyone's variations. Yeah, everyone's variations can fit under the blanket of a general statement.
Yes, and also, if they said they saw an angel in plates, they wouldn't know it was different or the same. There's no way to check that.
Right. No, totally understand that.
What is the angel wearing? What does the angel look like?
Yeah,
Does the angel have
right.
facial hair? How long is the does the angel?
We're not
have
told
hair?
that.
How long is that hair?
And it's possible that there wouldn't, even if there were differences, it's what you had the faith to see, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But an angel, you're going to see this angel in a white robe, probably, especially if Joseph Smith is saying what he saw, like in the case of he and Sidney Rigdon. I see the heavens, open, and then I see Jesus on the right hand of God and all that kind of stuff, and then Sidney Rigdon sees that also. So I think it could have been a guided imagery kind of situation.
Yeah. Okay. And then the last one here is Scott Christopher signing us off at the end of the episode. So
I like this clip too, because he looks really cool. This is like Tom Cruise in Top Gun heading for the motorcycle.
Marvelous work. They were out of rental cars.
Likely story.
Scott's not wearing a helmet. He must trust his faith that he won't get hurt.
So Martin Harris, one of the three witnesses to that's New York, right? Is that in New York or is that in Utah?
Oh, let me put it back. Let me put it back.
Clarkston. Up. It's Clarkston, Utah.
So
where
is there no helmet law in
Martin
Utah?
Harris is buried.
Okay, no helmet law in Utah. Do you guys know?
I think once you've ridden for like a year, you don't have to wear a helmet or something. I think there's one of those rules in both Utah, because it was the same rule in Ohio as well.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think he's breaking the law, but also I've been in a motorcycle accident without a helmet at 50 mile an hour, and I should have had a helmet on. So
you have? What happened?
Oh yeah, I was somewhere in my early 30s. It was when I was serving as bishop of the Snusky Ward. I was riding with other people who were on their motorcycles. They all slowed down, so I thought they had run into some sort of problem. I looked in the mirror and sort of tried to glance behind me, and when I did that, I went off the road just a little bit into gravel, and next, right in front of me was a curve, so now I'm starting to be on a curve, and I have signs in front of me that I'm either going to hit the signs or I need to get the bike back into the road, and on gravel, you don't want to slam your brakes on.
Right.
So I tried to force the bike back in. By the way, motorcycle, cool thing. You have to turn the opposite direction where you want to take the bike. So if you want to go to the left, you have to turn the handlebars to the right. And when I did that, the bike slid out from under me. I bounced down the road, maybe 50 to 100 yards. And I ended up getting stitches or staples in my head. I road rash on my shoulder really bad. I tore my ACL in my left knee and broke my ankle. And got to ride in an ambulance for the first time in my life.
Were you wearing your garments?
Yeah, I was wearing my G's. So
there you go.
There it is. I was going about 50 mile an hour. I was actually 55 on the road. I think I slowed down to about 50 when the actual accident happened.
Okay, the way I understand this is people in front of you were slowing down.
people behind me were slowing down, and they had gone like way back, and all of a sudden now I'm riding by myself, and I'm wondering why they're. And when I turned, by the way, when I turned, I'm sure I pushed the handlebars just a little bit to the left, which then took me over to the right, and so it was not good. Anyway,
well, I'm glad you're okay.
I could have died, but I'm alive. So the only scars I have are a torn ACL still, a plate in my ankle with screws, and some road rash on my shoulder. Yeah, it was bad. I wanted to get up, and the people that came to me immediately after the accident, I said, "Oh, I think I'm fine," because you don't feel anything. You really are in your head. You really do think you're fine. And the lady and the man who stopped to help me said, "You don't want to get up."
No, don't get up.
Oh, my foot was
be walking around on the side of your ankle.
It was pretty obvious from my leg that things were not right. So anyway, we're okay.
See, you were meant to do this.
Yeah, I was meant to do this. I was already doing this, but yeah, I was meant to do this. All right. Anyway, that's
the reason you showed us that clip.
No, I thought you had the motorcycle thing.
That was the end. That was the end.
Because I wanted to see that because it reminds me of Tom Cruise.
Yeah,
they cut it before Kelly. Is it Kelly McGillis? Is that who it is? Comes out to join him.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't check to see anything else there.
Okay,
is that the guy off Top Gun, Kelly McGillis or something?
I think. Well, that's the love interest, isn't it?
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Different person. Does it the same person that plays her in part 2?
Well, no, because that's yeah, Kelly McGillis. Totally. Yeah, she looks different now. No, that's Jessica Jennifer, the girl from
Friends.
Labyrinth. What?
Oh, no, I was thinking Jennifer Aniston from Friends. I saw it, but I didn't think it was.
I'm having trouble remembering her name right now for some reason.
No worries.
It's Jennifer Connelly. Comes right up.
Okay, we do have. I'll let you guys share any final thoughts here. I will just say 3 witnesses, 8 witnesses. Go read all the statements. Things don't happen the way these 3 guys and Scott Christopher tell you. They leave out a lot of things. They're adapting these stories for the camera. And when you go read the accounts, maybe these guys didn't see what we base our entire lives, time, energy, and resources to building up the kingdom of God. Maybe these things didn't quite happen the way they said. Thoughts from you guys, and we'll go to the phone calls.
I want to hear what Dan has to say, but I do want to say something nice about Dan Peterson since Dan Vogel was so rude to him last week. For those of you who don't remember, are there any of you who don't remember when they're carrying that huge sack of plates down the hill and Dan says, it's Dan Peterson's lunch. Okay, so having said
what his lunch was?
What?
Tapered tartar on toast.
Say that 4 times fast.
Tapered tartar on toast. I like it. I do want to give him credit, though, for at least dressing appropriately. At least he threw a tie on for the camera, for crying out loud.
His shoes match his outfit a whole lot better than Harper's, don't they?
He has dress shoes on. I mean, it's like he's going someplace where it's important.
Yeah.
So if you want more detail of the witnesses, go to my channel on YouTube. There's 2 videos, one on the 3 and one on the 8 witnesses. And you get all the quotes and details and things all worked out in slow motion.
Very good. Now, is there anything that is there an address for that?
I'm putting it in the
just
comments.
Put my name in, and it's Early Mormon Explained.
Early Mormon Explained.
Early Mormonism Explained, or
it's just a trick question.
Early Mormon History Explained.
Here's Book of Mormon Witnesses Part 1. The 3?
Yeah, there you are.
Book of Mormon Witnesses Part 2, the 8. That's Dan Vogel.
Yeah.
67,000 views. And
what? How many?
67,000 views. You're killing it over there, Dan.
Wow, Dan.
And 27,000 on the 8 witnesses. So
fantastic. Any calls?
Yeah, we've got some phone calls. So let me get that off the screen. And we'll go to the first call. Jeff, are you there?
I am here. Yeah.
All right. You're on Mormonism Live, my friend.
All right. Hey, everybody. I kind of zeroed in on the hallucination stuff a little bit on this one. And Dan, you kind of touched on it on the end here while I was on hold with kind of the group hallucination stuff. Kind of reminds me of the hero's journey was mentioned in the chats and that kind of stuff around ayahuasca and mushrooms and all those things. But I guess the point that I was calling in to make was around going to the Hill Cumorah in late 80s, I guess it would have been, to see the Hill Cumorah pageant back when they did that. I don't even know if that still exists or if that's a thing.
No, it's gone.
Yeah,
President Nelson did away with it.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it was a shelf breaker for many others, like it was for me. Not a breaker, but an early shelf item.
Oh, you had a bad experience?
Why?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting because the way that they make Christ resurrect, you know, they just kind of do the lighting in a way that makes the whole hill dark, but then light up the top of the mountain or hill, whatever. And like, oh, okay. So some fancy lighting back in the day, they could have pulled this off. All right. So, you know, just made me think a little bit. So yeah, it wasn't the faith promoting thing it was meant to be as a 13 or 14-year-old kid.
I saw it once.
Yeah. What's that?
I saw the pageant once. I wanted to see it when Donny Osmond was, but I missed it.
Oh wow, that was probably a few years before me. I'm guessing I didn't get anybody cool like that.
So, excuse me, Donny Osmond was in the Hill Cumorah pageant. Was he playing Joseph?
I don't know. I can't say who he was playing. Maybe
I don't think Joseph's in it.
I don't know.
Well, thank you,
Yeah,
Jeff.
I couldn't tell you one thing about that pageant besides the end of it there. But the thing about that though, we were kind of talking in the chats about mushrooms potentially in the fields there. And years later, like as I don't know if physically out, mentally out is a thing, but I had left the church years ago and still think about it obviously from time to time. And I'm like, yeah, it's very, very possible he's walking across those cow pastures, picks up a mushroom or two on the way to the old Sacred Grove over there. And, you know, that was just one of my working theories. Like, yeah, that could have happened. But then, like, you know, early last year, I found Mormon stories and all the history stuff. And I'm like, this is probably worse, actually. This seems way worse than just like having a little mushroom trip and seeing God and Jesus. But yeah, so I think it's interesting. I just think it's interesting that this is really part of the conversation. And it's truly interesting, especially with all the Smith family occult stuff. Somebody mentioned the dagger in the chats earlier that I had never heard of before, but has some clear occult symbols on it. So just with their circle of friends and all that they're exposed to, it just seems like, you know, why not? Somebody could have easily had, you know, some sort of insight as to how to influence people into, hey, did you see it? Yeah, I see it. That kind of stuff. So I don't think it's that far out of the realm of possibility. And I really appreciate that it's being mentioned. And yeah, I just think it's cool.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate your call. By the way,
yeah,
is this a dagger I see before me? The handle toward my hand. There you go.
Oh, nice. Good
Thank
one.
you for the call.
Yeah. Yep, sure thing. Thanks.
Just a note too. I mean, I don't know, Dan, if you give it any credibility necessarily, but Bryce Blankenagel and I forget what the other gentleman's name is, but they've done a ton of work giving supportive evidence for ethnogenics or psychedelics being used to sort of prompt these spiritual experiences. And they've put on some sessions and presentations at Sunstone and written some articles and done some podcast interviews. So if folks are interested in that, you can take a look. The next call is Tony with Spiritual Eyes Experience. Tony, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, tell us what you saw with Second Sight with your spiritual eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I appreciate the call. Let me call in. And it's great to have Dan on the show tonight. Hey, I just, as I listen, I'm impressed in how easy it is for this to actually happen. When I was on my mission in Argentina, I went to Argentina 85 to 87. And I was in the Bahia Blanca mission, which had just separated from the South Buenos Aires mission. And so my mission president, who's been a subject of this show, by the way, his name is President Lozano, had told us missionaries, he was the third president, had told us missionaries that the mission had not yet been dedicated as an oversight. So he set aside a day for the whole mission to dedicate our respective areas. And at that time, it was the largest land mission in the world. So pretty dispersed. And I was near a city called Neuquén, and we were told to go to the high ground on a certain day, fast for several days prior to the dedication, build an altar, repent of individual sins, and as a group, the senior missionary there, which happened to be our district leader, or zone leader, would then dedicate the mission, the area, and we would see, he said, we would see angels go before us. And I fasted for several days. I felt very spiritual, to be honest with you. And I went to the hilltop, and we spent probably a good hour or two individually praying, asking for individual forgiveness of our sins. And then after the dedication was done, honestly, I felt like I passed out during the dedicatory prayer. But I remember seeing as a model the city of Neuquén laying before me, below me, and seeing angels moving from my right to my left to the homes, preparing the people, whispering in their ears that they would soon receive message from representatives of God. And behind them, I could see an army of missionaries following through behind the angels, whispering good tidings of the gospel. And I'll tell you, to this day, I'm 58 years old. To this day, I still can see that vision in my mind. I know it didn't happen, but I just think it's hard to maybe we should be so critical of the 8 witnesses, because I was prompted. I was deprived of water and food, and I was kind of told by my mission president what to expect. So I just wanted to share that personal experience.
Hey, Tony, I got a couple questions for you, because I'm glad you saw something. I've had a visionary experience or two, but it's been a long time ago, but I remember it as well. But since you call in, let me ask you these questions. How easy would it be for you at this point, or right after you saw this, or at any point in between, to tell the difference between whether you saw this vision with your natural eyes or with your spiritual eyes? How easy would that have been for you to tell?
Now, in retrospect, easy. At the time, to me, it was the same thing. To me, it was the same event. My natural eyes and my spiritual eyes. If you asked me what I saw, I would have seen those things, knowing that I saw them through my eyes, but not maybe in vision.
Yes, and I wonder sometimes that's why there's that confusion with the witness statements, because how do you tell the difference? You're seeing something. And how do you know whether you're using your actual eyes or spiritual eyes?
Yeah. Right. I tell you one thing that now looking back, and I've listened to Dan Vogel's discussions on this in his podcast, which are great. Thank you, Dan. But I remember coming out of that, and each of us then having a chance to share what we saw. And some of the accounts were similar, some were not. Some elders almost looked embarrassed because they saw nothing. But it almost seemed, now looking back, it seems that maybe there was some peer pressure for people to have a consensus of what we saw and maybe opting into the experience.
Absolutely. And I would think that the more people talk about, like your vision, I don't know what order you were in, if you went toward the beginning or toward the end, but if you're saying what you saw, then there would be an inclination for certain other people, suggestible people following you, to echo what it was that you saw and believe that they had seen it themselves.
I would agree, and that makes me think of it. Yes, I think that's maybe the 3 witnesses, maybe something similar like that happened, but definitely. And it's just amazing to this day. If you ask me what I saw, I know it's not real, but I still saw it, which is incredible to me.
Yeah. Well, what is real, Tony?
Yeah.
I mean, if you see it,
Sure.
if it's spiritual, isn't that more real than looking and seeing some trees on a hill? Because you're seeing the truth that's behind the veneer of reality that's placed over our vision, and you are seeing the real thing happening.
You know, I've been out of the church for probably close to 15 or 20 years now, and I still have that feeling inside of me of that experience. Knowing it's not real, but I still can see it in my mind. So it's very real. It's very, I don't know. Hey, before you move on to the next caller, I just want to take this opportunity. Dan Vogel, you need to do a tour of the Palmyra area. I think there's a lot of us that would sign up.
That would be good.
All right.
Thanks for the
So
phone call.
I just wanted to say about different ways of having hallucinations is this book here that I have is Hallucinations in Clinical Psychiatry, a guide for mental health professionals. This book gives about 50 different ways humans can have visions, hallucinations. One of them is the lowering of the blood sugar through fasting. That's an ancient way. The monks used it. I mean, this thing about mushrooms, psilocybin, various kinds of drugs is kind of a modern explanation for what happened in a different age. And across the board, I mean, have you noticed in the church how there isn't very many visions anymore? But this is like across the board, not just with Mormons, but with visual hallucinations have been on the decline for the last 100 years. And they were more prevalent in previous generations. So, and not everyone, there was different ways. There's this different ways of getting a vision. I'm not saying no one ever got visions from using mushrooms in Joseph Smith's day. I'm just saying that wasn't a method that he leaned on as a way of ensuring that it would happen. Mostly, you know, it happened or it didn't happen. And those people that didn't have them, you just don't hear about those people. There could have been more than 8 people trying to see these plates but didn't see them, and they just say they were wondering why Peter Whitmer Sr. isn't one of the 8 witnesses. Well, maybe he tried and he failed. There was not a certain number. 8. We have to have 8. There wasn't a certain number. They just came up with 8 special witnesses to round out the 12 people, including Joseph Smith, but maybe the 12th one was supposed to be Peter Whitmer, but it wasn't. So you got to be careful with, assuming that Joseph Smith took these people out and sat the plates on a log and they opened it up and they all saw it at the same time. It was all nice and clean and everything. But that's the written testimony makes it seem that way. And we're being led down the road through this one affidavit and very little else to go on. And so it's very dangerous to try to recreate what the 8 witnesses experienced by this written testimony, because it doesn't give us a clue really as to what happened.
RFM, I'd love to know your thoughts in comparison to what Tony just said, but I had an absolutely visionary experience praying about the Book of Mormon. I had another person with me in that experience. They did not see anything, and I was aware in my head as it was happening that if other people were there, they wouldn't see it. I had spent numerous nights staying up extremely late reading the Book of Mormon, knowing that I was working towards the moment where I would complete the book and pray. Just like this gentleman fasting for, he said, multiple days. Tony. So going multiple days without eating. In the case of Lucy Walker, Joseph Smith gives her 24 hours to decide. She comes back with a no, and he gives her 24 more hours to decide. If you think she slept those 2 nights, that would be ridiculous to know the pressure that was on her to think that she got to sleep easy and slept. She says she was in torment both of those evenings, both of those nights. And so I'm curious, in your experiences, could you discern? Because I could tell it was my spiritual eyes. It wasn't I'm seeing it, but I'm aware that only I'm seeing, and it's sort of in my head too, and it's not a real thing that others would have seen if they were in the room. Your thoughts on your experiences, if you could discern whether it would have been seen by others or not?
I don't think so. It was a waking dream of sorts.
Yeah.
But Bill, I've never heard this story before. What did you see? What happened?
When I prayed about the Book of Mormon, I didn't get an answer. I stayed up late into the night. I had finished the book the night before, late into the night. So the next day I stayed up praying for hours and I didn't get an answer. And so I finally go to sleep. I get up the next day. I'm laying on the couch, and Amanda is sitting on the floor, and we're talking about the commitment I'm going to have to make to keep the word of wisdom. And I say, hey, drugs are easy. Smoking, I've never been a smoker. That's no problem. But man, I love my dad makes tea and sweet tea, and I just don't see it. It doesn't make any sense to me. I'd have to give tea up. And like in that moment where she's sort of arguing with me, and I know that I have to have this vision, I have to have this experience to know the Book of Mormon is true. At the top of the stairs in my parents' home, I see a voice. By the way, a voice comes along and says, "Stop arguing. It's true. All of it's true." Which, by the way, not all of it's true. I've learned that up to this point. There are lots of things about what the missionaries taught that isn't true.
Okay, so the voice was misinformed, but you heard a voice say, "Stop arguing. It's true. All of it's true."
Yeah, I don't know if it was in my head or if it was audible. I don't know. And then at the top of the steps, I could sort of see my life unfold, and I could see kids, and they were my kids I was going to have. And I don't know how to explain it. It was something. And I know it's not real because the message it was given was not absolutely true, which means the voice lied to me, because some of the things that I believed up to that point from the discussions that the missionaries given are things that the church doesn't believe to be true, or there are contradictions in history that demonstrate it's not true. And I don't know what to do with that, other than I'm very aware that my brain, I've done ayahuasca, for instance, and I had a much more incredible vision that was much more real to me, having done ayahuasca. So
was there anything about this unfolding of your life you see in the vision at the top of the stairs in your parents' house that included anything Mormon related?
No, it was sort of marriage and children, but there's so much time between that and when I actually have kids, it wouldn't be even appropriate to go like, oh, those were the kids I had. I don't know. But the message was, I remember the message. The message was, it's true. All of it's true. And I just know all of it's not true. Anyway.
And you had not been doing any controlled substances?
No, nothing.
See, this is why, although I respect people doing research in this area, and I don't know what the actuality is about anybody back then using these controlled substances Mormon related before they see visions. You don't have, it's not necessary.
Yeah, you don't need them.
It may have happened. I'm not saying that it didn't happen. I'm just saying it's not necessary. People don't have to do drugs to have visions.
Right. It's an unnecessary hypothesis.
Yeah, that's the phrase I was struggling for. Thank you, Dan.
So I went into joining the church with this certainty that God had told me through some source that this is the Lord's true church. And hence, because of that experience, it was so easy to dismiss. First off, Mormonism will, if you read online, especially back in the 90s, Mormonism will tell you there are critics, but it points you to the wrong critics and the wrong criticisms. It didn't point me to Dan Vogel. It pointed me to Wesley Walters and the Cowdery dude and sort of that evangelical criticism of Mormonism, which is really weak. And so you really, by having the spiritual experience and by only being shown the bad criticisms of the church, it was so easy to just dismiss it. And
I wonder if Maven had a vision at all. Have you ever had a vision, Maven?
Yeah. It was when I was a teenager, and a boy that I was friends with and maybe had like some more feelings for, and who had some feelings for me, at one point decided that he didn't anymore. And I was very sad about that. And I was very emotional, and I was crying into my pillow. And I had a vision where I felt like I saw, or I was given my future husband, and he was going to be a great, amazing Mormon man, of course, with the priesthood. He was going to love and respect me. And it felt extremely real to me at the time. It wasn't a specific person or anything, but just, I don't know, just kind of the body shape. I felt that it was for sure a real person, and it was somebody I was going to meet someday, and maybe I would recognize when I saw him. So, which I guess technically could still happen,
Right, there's
so
still time.
there's still time. Yeah.
And if it doesn't, you know what the ultimate fallback is?
Yeah, it's because next life. Well, I'd say it was because I wasn't righteous. So I probably lost that man. He's probably married to some other person now.
What was the lesson you learned, Maven?
The lesson I learned?
I'm just playing on the Dan Peterson thing from the Kirtland Temple.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Anyway, I just think it is kind of interesting that vision came after a pretty good cry session about a boy hurting my feelings, but it could be just a coincidence, and maybe God was going to show me that anyway.
You were dehydrated because you cried so much.
Yeah, you know what else I also did, because I didn't want other people to know about my crying, and so when I cried, I would often hold my breath for as long as I could, and then I would breathe it out into my pillow. And so I would honestly get like headaches and like deprive myself. I wasn't intentionally doing it. I hated crying. So I was holding my breath to kind of try to not cry and prevent it. But then also I knew like family members wouldn't hear me crying and, be nosy and come want to talk to me when I didn't want to talk. So that might have something to do with it
deprivation.
Also.
Yeah, that is one of the ways of hallucinating.
I've laughed so hard that I've seen stars and stuff. I think there's things that happen to us that way. It wouldn't take much for that to turn into something just a little bit more, and then go, I think what I saw was this.
I laugh a lot, but I've never laughed that hard, Bill.
I have. I've laughed that hard where I've almost passed out on a few occasions where I had to consciously go, stop laughing, or you're not going to be conscious here in a moment. So,
oh my gosh,
yeah,
that must have been a funny joke.
It was hilarious. My brother is a very funny person, so there's that. Okay, we got one more call. And by the way, folks, hang on for a few minutes at the end of the show. We have a special announcement. And so if you'll just hang on, we'll get to the last call and then we'll get to that. So one moment here. The last caller is Matt. Matt, are you there?
Where are the female callers?
Yes, I am. How are we doing, Bill?
Not calling it. Good. You're on Mormonism Live, my friend.
Matt.
Wonderful. Well, yes. Hi there, RFM.
How are you doing? You know what you call a guy with no arms or legs on your doorstep?
Matt.
There it is.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I also want to say hi to Dan.
Hi.
Oh, it's all good. Thank you for taking my call. And I just had a question. We were talking about Joseph Smith and how he could have, made the plates. Now he injured his finger. And so it's kind of adjacent to that. It got me thinking about the stone box that was purportedly at the bottom of the hill Cumorah. And I wanted to know, I wanted to ask Dan, Dan, what's up with that stone box? Was there ever really a stone box? People said that they saw the stone box, or is that just an old wives' tale that I just remember hearing somewhere? And then I had a second question, kind of not really related, but I was recently at the Mormon Battalion in San Diego. Get there, you get free parking. And it was great. But they made a claim in the tour that Brigham Young sent a letter to James K. Polk requesting aid. And then I asked after the tour if they had a photocopy of the letter, if they knew about the letter, and they said, we don't know anything about a letter that Brigham Young sent. I was like, well, why are they saying it in this tour? And so I just wanted to know if you knew anything about the stone box, and then also Brigham Young requesting aid to James K. Polk, resulting in the formation of the Mormon Battalion. And that's all it from me.
I can't answer the second one because I'm not really a Brigham Young specialist. But the first one,
okay, gotcha.
Maybe RFM has an idea. I guess not.
Yeah, apparently it's dated. Wait a second here. Anyway, dated August 9th, 1846.
Oh, you looked it up that
President of
fast,
the
huh?
United States. So anyway, there's digital collections. So apparently there is some truth to that. But go ahead, Dan, with the other question.
Yeah, on the stone box, there's Josh, whatever his name is, wrote a book about, and he's trying to piggyback on the empty tomb story, and it's the empty box. And he claims that there's an empty box on the hill, and people saw the empty box up there, and there were no plates in the box, but people saw the empty box, and that's evidence for Mormonism. But the problem with that is that there was no empty box. Nobody saw an empty box. There was no empty box sitting up on top of the hill.
It's a clean hill, right, Dan?
Yeah, well, so Lorenzo Saunders is the main guy you should go to for this, because he said right after Joseph Smith's claim to have removed the plates from the hill in 1827, the very next Sunday, I think he says, they went up there, and he and the other probably money diggers who had been looking for the plates. There'd been people up there looking for plates, digging holes. There was one major hole on the eastern side, big giant excavation on the eastern side. And then Joseph Smith said that he had told Samuel T. Lawrence, he showed him the wrong place when they went up there and looked for the plates together. They went on the eastern side, because Joseph Smith always goes on the eastern side of these hills to dig, because it's special. The eastern side is a special side of the hill. But he said later that was the wrong place, and that they were digging in the wrong place. And then later, through Oliver Cowdery in 1835, and the Messenger and Advocate said it was on the western side. But Lorenzo Saunders and his buddies went up there right after Joseph Smith claimed to get the plates, and they walked it by course, back and forth, up and down, looking for fresh dirt, any digging, anything, and of course, I mean, why would Joseph Smith not recover this thing? But then later when people said they saw the place where the plates were dug out of, they're talking about that eastern excavation most of the time. But later in the 19th century, the farmer that was up there later told Edward Stevenson that there were some stones that they found, kind of large, flattish stones that they threw to the bottom of the hill, and they were then drug off years and years ago. So, but nobody saw any box intact on the hill. Just stones that they threw down that they were clearing to, plow. They threw them, just rolled them down the hill, of course, instead of carrying them. And at the bottom there was a pile of rocks, so just like almost any field where farmers are plowing. And so nobody saw any box. There was never any box.
There you go. Thank you, caller.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
You're welcome.
And if you want to read that letter, you can probably Google it, and there's a lot of different sources that has it.
All right.
Lorenzo Saunders interview by the Edward Kelly and William Kelly, 1884, September 1884. You can go on archive.org, look up early Mormon documents, go to volume 2, where I have the Lorenzo Saunders interviews with the Kelly brothers, and it's right in there. That's one source. There's another one, 1885, Thomas Grigg.
Yeah. All right. If anything else from you two in regards to the 3 and 8 witnesses, I think at the very least we showed enough reasonable doubt that you shouldn't just accept what's the whole cloth sort of statement, but accept blindly that this happens the way the church folks tell you it does. that these witnesses have said lots of things, and some of the things they've said contradict the way the church frames it and point to something much more ambiguous and much less physical than we make those experiences to be.
Yes, if the Book of Mormon is the keystone of the religion, the witness statements are the foundation for the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
And as we've seen, there's some pretty sizable cracks in that foundation.
Yeah. Yep. Any last things from you, Dan?
Well, so to tell like I said before, to tell the difference between a hallucination and a theoretically real vision, you would have to figure out whether the Book of Mormon is real history or not. And if it's not history, it wasn't a real vision.
Right.
As simple as that. So Book of Mormon is having a hard time with historicity. And right now, the scales are very heavy on not. So the witnesses hallucinating is a very distinct probability.
Yeah, in fact, Blake Ostler with his expansion theory, Terrell Givens with his bricolage, and Richard Bushman with his pseudepigrapha, all three of them seem to recognize that something isn't right in terms of what we claim about that as a historical document. All right, folks, thank you. I'm going to turn some time over to Maven, and I'll just put you up on the screen, Maven, and you can take it from there.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and bring this up. This is fresh from my Monday activities. And I am wearing a helmet, which I love and I have a lot of fun with, although, and a jacket, although I can't really say much about the rest of my outfit, but it was wear red. And so that's what I had. So anyway, just showing that I do try to be safe when I ride my little scoot around. I'm going to go ahead and take that down for a second. And I wanted to, I guess, maybe introduce by going over a gift from Bill, actually. This was my Christmas gift, or 2 books here. And hopefully they come up on the camera. It's kind of hard to see, but the titles of them, if they didn't come up, this one is Interesting Facts for Curious Minds, 1,572 random but mind-blowing facts about history, science, pop culture, and everything in between. And then the other book given to me was Badass Affirmations, The Wit and Wisdom of Wild Women. And this has been my favorite. I really love it. And when I got these books for Christmas, it just it really made me think of another time that I was given 2 books by somebody. And so I'll go ahead and bring my slides back up. These are the 2 books. I've mentioned this before, I think, but both by Dr. Laura Schlesinger, 10 Stupid Things Women Do to Mess Up Their Lives, and The Proper Care and Feeding of Husbands. This was my 18th birthday gift from my father. And at the time, it was very well-meaning, and there's actually not a lot of bad advice in it. There's actually some really good things, although it does tend to be kind of victim blamey. For example, one of the 10 stupid things is women staying with abusive husbands, and it's just kind of like none of these really go into the reasons why women end up with bad or abusive men or men that don't appreciate them, etc. But just kind of blames them all for staying or getting into the relationships. But overall, the advice to get out of an abusive relationship, that's always good advice, even if it is kind of victim blaming. But anyway, it came from a good place. I think my father meant well. And at the time, I really liked these gifts. But I feel like these different sets of books really represent, and this is what I felt at the time, very different ways that the giver saw me. So to me, Bill's gift represented someone who sees me as a person and knew things that, that I would find, curious and interesting to learn about. And that just knew I just felt seen, I guess maybe is the best way to put it, as a person, as a human being. Whereas my dad's gift represents kind of the overall culture of objectification of women, as sexual objects, partners, servants, or helpmeets to men, and then of course reproductive vessels. So women, little girls even, we're entirely defined by and controlled over our ability to reproduce in the church. And for most of us, men have determined those decisions for us with more or less success or input from ourselves. And in the episodes that we've done, like when we had Nicole on, I think in general, just one of the things that women have the most regret over in coming out of the church and deconstructing the church is kind of recognizing how those decisions were often taken away from us. So I'm pretty confident saying that one of the biggest hurdles for all of us in escaping Mormonism is this fight for personhood in our own minds and hearts and souls. And once we get there, there's still kind of the wider world, both in and out of Mormonism, that refuses to see us as people and is still fighting to control us. I'm thinking of Cardin Ellis in the Jubilee episode, where it was just like, what do you people want? When is equality enough equality? And so that's a big reason, or big part of the reason why I'm so passionate about reproductive rights, because to me, the pro-life versus pro-choice argument is ultimately the same fight, but just in the broader world. The pro-life stance always is a patriarchal one. It always sees women as objects of reproduction over and above seeing them as individuals with the right to make their own decisions about their own bodies. Whereas the pro-choice movement is one that values a person's right to their autonomy and reproductive choices over and above their ability to reproduce. And especially so when that requires a woman or a child, to be honest, to be forced through pregnancy, birth, and motherhood against her own will. So unfortunately, after the Draining the Swamp episode, I was kind of sad to see how many people in the Exmo community still haven't been able to leave this bit of misogyny behind and still really objectify women in terms of sexual purity and, the decision to be mothers. And I feel sad that there's still people unable to hold empathy or concern for the health and well-being of an individual, above what might be growing in her uterus. And even if that pregnant person is their own child, and even if that's, the conception also happened against the child's own will, it's a very surprising and sad thing to me to see. And I know that there were many pro-life viewers of the channel who did not appreciate being held accountable for the women and children that are harmed and killed as a direct result of government pro-life policies. But I do have to say, they absolutely, unequivocally are responsible for them, because the end game for the pro-life movement is one that strips reproductive choices from individuals and gives them over to the government. So you can't support the government taking control over female reproductive health and choices and then say you're not responsible when raped 9-year-olds become mothers or women die from pregnancy when they could have been saved by an abortion. You did do that. That's what you voted for. So that was just one thing. It was justifications like that, or even worse, that kind of came through after that episode. Just really showed me how much further there still is to go in the fight for reproductive rights. And even among those who think they've deconstructed from the Mormon misogyny and sexism. And I want to dedicate more of my personal time to that fight. And sometimes to make room for things that we care about, we have to give up other good things. And I've decided that will be Mormonism Live. So this is my last show. And I knew this was going to happen, but I'm so grateful to Bill and RFM and to you, the community, for your support and encouragement and everything you've done for me in the last, I think it's 2.5 years about. You have made me who I am today, even down to my new name, Maven, which I love and I feel like represents the real me more than my legal name at this point. And I will be forever grateful for the opportunity to be on the show. And I'm so grateful for the friendship and mentorship and support that I've gotten from RFM and Bill. And again, the community at large, which has far surpassed, what I could even get from my family, and gosh, it touches me so much. You guys have no idea how grateful I am and always will be. So um I guess that's really it. I hope that many of you will stay in touch and follow my new efforts in this. And I do anticipate that most of you probably will. Um, but again, just with a thank you to everyone, that is my goodbye to you all. I probably will still join the chat here and there. It just kind of depends. But the thing I want you to remember the most is that I love you. And again, thank you. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, RFM.
Yeah, thank you, Maven. While I think, our views might differ a touch, I think maybe I agree with you to a large extent, but not exactly. But what I do appreciate is you're very passionate, and I wish you nothing but the best in going off and making a difference in the world. And I think more of us could put our money where our mouth is and things that we feel deeply about and are passionate about to go out into the world and to make a difference. And I'm grateful that you had the chance to be with us for 2.5 years. And I think you made a drastic difference in how the show sort of was maybe stumbling a touch because I wasn't able to manage both things in the beginning, not knowing all this new technology. And I just want to say thank you. You came at the right time, the right place, and we'll miss you a bunch. So
I love you, Maven. I'll see you around.
Yep.
For sure. Yeah. You're not fully rid of me. But yeah. Thank you.
So, yep. But the show must go on. So folks, Mormonism Live next week, Monday, 6:20 p.m. Mountain Time.
Or Wednesday.
And, sorry. Yeah. Wednesday's the new show. Wednesday.
You're kind of rattled, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. But
you're trying to hold it together, but inside you're a mess.
But Wednesday, 6:20 p.m. And we'll see everybody then for the next episode of Mormonism Live. Maven, good luck. Dan, thank you so much for being on tonight. And folks, for everyone who supports the program and watches, thank you so much for doing so. And couldn't do it without you either. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.